afternoon, all. I think it's just about afternoon here. I think you're a little bit further into your afternoon. Welcome to the latest UNE workshop, where we'll be providing space for our Urban Nature Plus cities to share their experiences of biodiversity assessment. We're going to be recording the workshop to help out with our note-taking, but it won't be put online anywhere, so feel free to be as open as you like in the discussions. If anyone does object to the recording, no problem at all, but it'll just mean we have to be better with our note-taking, but please do let us know in the chat. So for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Stuart Connop. I'm Work Package Lead for Work Package 4, and I'm an ecologist by background, specialising in designing nature-based solutions for people and for nature. On a previous EU project, myself and my colleague Caroline Nash were involved in a process of exploring and developing evaluation indicators for evaluating the impact of nature-based solutions at the scale in cities. We had a specific focus on environmental indicators, everything from evaluating water storage and water quality to air pollution and thermal stress, but this also included a strong focus on evaluating the impact of nature-based solutions on biodiversity. The project involved working with local authorities in a range of cities across Europe to explore the challenges and the opportunities for implementing evaluation. And through this process, we gained a lot of experience, which will hopefully support the UNP Plus project. In UNP Plus, we're involved in a cross-cutting task, which includes a blend of evaluating state-of-the-art in relation to urban biodiversity evaluation, exploring city experiences, your experiences of biodiversity evaluation, and developing a toolkit of options to underpin the capacity building programme in Work Package 5. And today we're hoping to launch this cross-cutting task by providing you as city representatives with an opportunity to explore each other's approaches and experiences of evaluating biodiversity in a little more detail. But first, you'll hear from me a little bit just to start the session off. So I'm going to provide a bit of an introduction into why we should care about putting nature in cities rather than just putting green in cities, and how we could evaluate that. Well, first and foremost, because biodiversity is in crisis. Globally, at least 1.2 million plants and animal species are estimated to be under threat of extinction. And as we heard from Ben Casper of DG Environment last week, despite the ambitions of EU Birds Directive and Habitats Directive, they're not having the intended impacts on both EU and global biodiversity, which continues to decline. So in recognition of this, a global biodiversity framework was established at the Biodiversity COP15, and this framework included targets to reverse this pattern of global biodiversity decline by the planet becoming net nature positive by 2030 and living in harmony with nature by 2050. Incredibly ambitious targets. But why should we care about this in cities? Well, some people might argue that the more people we put in cities, the more countryside there is left for nature. Well, firstly, because urbanization has a huge impact on biodiversity, both directly, as sprawl of grey infrastructure and sterile landscape areas replace natural habitat, but it also has an impact indirectly due to the land pressures required to support large human populations in cities. So if we are going to start to reverse these declines, then there really is a need to reverse these pressures that are caused by our urban areas. Perhaps as importantly, though, nature can have huge benefits in cities. Bringing nature back can have benefits in terms of managing stormwater, improving water quality, improving air quality, providing relief from the extremes of thermal temperatures we can experience in cities. As we all know, it can provide good jobs, health and well-being benefits, and it can also, really importantly, reconnect our communities with the value and importance of nature to their own lives, which can be lost when humans are in urban settings separated from the natural environment. But also, equally importantly, cities can have direct benefits for nature. There's an increasing number of studies that show that if spaces in cities are created the right way and managed the right way, they can support a broad diversity of species, including some species that are rare and threatened in the broader landscape, where pressures like agricultural land intensification and widespread pesticide use are causing the eradication of many species. So cities can be an important refuge for many of these threatened species. But how do we reverse this pattern of biodiversity decline in cities, and how do we know whether our cities are providing better spaces for nature or that they're continuing to drive patterns of decline? Well, the answer is that we need to strategically enhance cities as spaces that can support biodiversity, but also analyse the state of nature and biodiversity in these cities. The UNP process, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with now, includes 3 key steps that relate to this idea of evaluating impact, but particularly evaluating impact on biodiversity. So step 5, analysing current nature and biodiversity, setting a baseline. Step 6, setting indicators and targets. And step 9, establishing monitoring, reporting and evaluation. But the key question is what monitoring to implement. What's a good measure of change in biodiversity? What's effective as a reporting and communicating tool? What approach is achievable given the expertise and resources within the city team? And how does this link to existing city evaluation approaches? Well, perhaps the best place to start in answering those questions is what actually has to be done. And as we all learned on Friday, the Nature Restoration Regulation includes a legal requirement for what has to be done in cities in relation to monitoring biodiversity. This aligns with the Global Biodiversity Framework and in requiring no net loss of green urban space and tree cover by 2030, and a steady increase in their total area from 2030. So it states that urban green spaces, for urban green spaces to continue to provide the necessary ecosystem services, their loss should be stopped and they should be restored and increased by integrating green infrastructure and nature-based solutions such as green roofs and green walls. Their integration can contribute to maintaining and increasing not only the area of urban green space, but also, if we include trees, the area of the urban tree cover. The regulation, I don't know if someone could mute themselves. There's a rather strange noise in the background. Thank you. The regulation further defines urban green space as the total area of trees, bushes, shrubs, permanent herbaceous vegetation, lichens, mosses, ponds and watercourses within a city. And it includes a specific requirement to monitor the area change in this green space using the Copernicus Land Monitoring Service, similarly for tree cover. This therefore represents the minimum biodiversity monitoring requirement for cities in NRR. However, there is a need to explore whether the expectation will be that this monitoring is done at city level or member state level, but this level of monitoring will have to be done in cities. So that's our basic requirement. Is this enough monitoring to ensure that UNP is having a nature positive, a biodiversity net gain impact on cities? Well, in the meeting we had on Friday, this was our UNP cities plus other cities. There was a stark divide between those of you that thought this monitoring approach represented a strong measure of urban ecosystem health and those that felt that it was a weak measure. And when we look purely at nature positivity in terms of biodiversity in cities, it is potentially an even weaker measure. Green space in cities can be a complex mosaic of habitats rather than a generic greening that's applied to roofs and walls. This can include examples of other habitats that are included in the non-urban targets of the NRR. So things like forests, grasslands, wetlands, peatlands, also groups like pollinators, free-flowing rivers, coastal areas. Purely measuring the change in overall green space in an urban area could miss important subtle habitat changes from more semi-natural green spaces to more heavily managed and pressured green spaces, which could ultimately result in a situation where overall green space in a city could increase, but biodiversity continues this decline that's being seen globally. So as such, it's good to have targets for these aspects as part of the UNP, and also evaluation indicators to track change in relation to not just green space area and tree canopy area, but overall biodiversity. It's also good to have a range of indicators that reflect the different needs of cities in relation to urban greening. From the session with Ben on Friday, it's clear that there are a number of motivations for renaturing cities, and therefore a number of different indicators that might be needed to evaluate and communicate these barriers. So, for example, some of the challenges identified on our Menti exercise, such as restoring semi-natural areas in cities, supporting biodiversity, not just green, and restoring healthy soils from contaminated soils, need very different evaluation indicators to those specified in the NRR for green space area and canopy cover. And similarly, some of the opportunities that are identified, such as creating corridors for threatened species and biodiversity and sharing good cases and giving examples, also need their own indicators if they are to be effective in relation to generating evidence of positive change, but also communicating those positive change back to the stakeholders and communities. So how do we go about evaluating more than just green space area and tree canopy area? Well, there are in fact an enormous range of mechanisms to evaluate change in biodiversity. The number reflecting the complexity of accurately and precisely measuring biodiversity patterns within a defined area. And the difference between recording more mobile species like bats, birds, pollinators, and more sedentary species like trees. The Europabon essential biodiversity variables that are presented on the screen represent a holistic reference point for the evaluation of impacts on biodiversity. They were developed in collaboration with the European Commission's Knowledge Centre for Biodiversity and a broad stakeholder group of experts. The idea being to provide a transnational system for monitoring biodiversity and ecosystems in Europe. They created a list of 70 unique policy relevant and specified variables spanning 3 different realms: terrestrial, freshwater, and marine, and with 6 classes within each realm. So this slide presents an example of the EBVs from the terrestrial realm for species population. So as you can see, quite a diverse array covering species abundances and species distributions for different groups, ranging from birds through to pollinators, lichens, and also looking at things like invasive alien species, disease vectors, and pests. So whilst this is a very useful resource, there are issues of practicality when it comes to what can be achieved at a city level, and particularly by a city authority. The Evaluating the Impact of Nature-Based Solutions handbook was designed to provide more practical guidance for anyone wanting to assess the impact of implementing nature-based solutions. It was specifically designed to provide an entry point for practitioners and is heavily focused on urban areas. It was the result of several Horizon Europe projects working together, and this is reflected in the large number of indicators that it provides and the sometimes overlapping nature of some of these indicators. The handbook covers a range of societal challenges, and it includes evaluation of changes in biodiversity. The handbook itself presents 7 core biodiversity indicators, ranging from structural and functional connectivity through to species diversity and evenness indexes. All of these are applicable to all nature-based solution situations. And there's also an additional 30 indicators that are provided as a guide for other things that can be monitored and evaluated, which apply for some situations and scales, but not all situations and scales. In addition to providing these indicators, the added value of the handbook is that it not only defines the indicators, but it also provides details on other aspects of the delivery, including things like their strengths and weaknesses as an indicator, the level of expertise that's required to implement them, the data requirements required, and also a range of different approaches to implementing each indicator depending on resources and expertise. There's another process ongoing currently in the Horizon Europe task forces, task forces 1 and 2, to further develop these biodiversity indicators. This includes standardizing the level of information in the indicator descriptions, removing duplication and simplifying them, and providing more relevance and references to the different habitat contexts and target groups that each indicator is relevant for. So Caroline and I are both involved in this process, representing Task Force 2, and the ambition is to produce a mini handbook on biodiversity evaluation, which includes a much shorter list of core indicators and a shorter list of additional indicators that could be applied. So the aim is that the handbook will include an informative description of options for how each indicator can be implemented and a worked example of it being implemented in a case study. So the plan is that this will link to our activities and experiences in UNP Plus and will be very relevant for applying indicators in an urban context. If something more prescriptive is what you need, there are also ready-made assessment processes that are being implemented in cities, such as the City Biodiversity Index and the Emerging Urban Nature Index. The City Biodiversity Index has been developed to quantify and qualify change in relation to a city's ecological performance. So it includes a blend of indicators, including some direct biodiversity indicators, but also measures around ecosystem services and measures related to governance and management of biodiversity. But the challenges don't just stop at selecting the right indicator or indicators. There are also challenges relating to selecting the right metrics, both in terms of capturing the right data and in terms of having the capacity and resources to implement them correctly. For example, just one of the indicators in these toolkits and handbooks, change in number of species, can have a diversity of approaches to implementing metrics, from traditional survey approaches using experts to more inclusive approaches using citizen scientists, but also high throughput emerging innovations, such as using cameras and AI systems for image recognition, eDNA sampling, bioacoustic analysis, or high-resolution satellite imagery interpretation. Indeed, at a member state level, the situation is very complex, with data highly fragmented, different data collection and analysis methods used in different countries, data often limited spatially and temporally, and some countries struggling to meet the minimum biodiversity reporting requirements. So the grand challenge for UNP Plus is to develop a toolkit of evaluation indicators that support cities in evaluating their biodiversity baseline, but also provides flexibility in terms of differing capacities, capabilities, resources of different cities and different city scales. So within the project, we have what we're terming a cross-work package task, or a series of tasks, which includes an academic review in task 2.1.2, experiential evaluation in task 4.3, and then feeding into the capacity building program in task 5.3. We must also have got something right when we wrote this into the proposal, because implementing indicators to evaluate biodiversity change has emerged as a key priority for all 5 of our cities through the self-assessment and reflexive monitoring baseline approaches. So this workshop's designed to be a key starting point for this cross-work package process, but predominantly a chance for you, our UNP Plus cities, to share your experiences so far of biodiversity assessment and to learn a bit more about the successes that you've had and how you've had them, and the barriers that you've discovered in your own and each other's cities. So that's definitely enough from me, probably too much from me. I want to open the floor up for the UNE dialogue between yourselves so that we can learn and shape the recommendations that come out of this biodiversity assessment support that we're providing.